Hi, Alice. Hi, Mike. How does the offer of free beer sound to you guys?
Inconceivable. It will never happen.
Sounds like a dream. It's a dream world, isn't it?
No, it is not. Listen to this. Our friends at beer52.com are giving you the opportunity to sip 8 free exclusive craft beers from around the world.
I'm still not entirely sure that I believe you, but still, that's all well and good, right? So how? Tell me how.
I mean, that's 2 more than 6. What are the details, Steph?
Solid maths. All you need to do is go to www.beer52.com/distant and cover £4.95 for the postage. The case will be delivered straight to your doorstep and you don't even need to leave the house.
Yeah. I mean, technically, we're not allowed to leave the house anyway, are we?
Beer 52 are beer pioneers, gentlemen. They are going around the world to find the best and most interesting beer from the greatest small batch breweries on planet Earth. No surprise then that they are the world's most popular craft beer discovery club. Each month, Beer 52 deliver a case with a different theme. Themes have included Germany, Korea, Norway, South Africa, California, Finland, and many more, but they have not forgotten their roots. As an independent UK company, Beer 52 are also passionate about the UK craft beer scene. The beauty of Beer 52 is that they will not and do not hold you to ransom. There's no lock-in. You can leave at any time.
Oh, yeah, that sounds good, but I mean, you know me, Steph. I'm all about the snacks.
As well as your individual beers, Mike, you will receive a cheeky snack. You like magazines, Alice?
Well, I'm a confident reader, Steph.
Okay, do you like the award-winning craft beer magazine Ferment?
Oh, I mean, it sounds right up my alley.
There you go. Do you like dark beers? No, that's okay. You can opt for the light beer plan. It's easy.
You just go to www.beer52.com/distant to get your first case of 8 beers for free.
I'll just recap that, Alan, Steph. That is beer52.com/distant. Beer52.com. That's the word beer, right? Then the numbers 5 and 2 makes 52.com.
Welcome back to the Socially Distant Sports Bar. Episode 5 is here and ready for your ears. We're turning the lockdown into something of a lock-in. You can get involved with the pod at Distant Pod is where you can find us on Instagram, on Facebook and on Twitter. Each time we meet up in the bar, we bring 2 YouTube clips each and a book with us, and one of us chooses a sports documentary for us to watch. If you want to watch the clips a little bit later on, we'll put them all up on our YouTube channel, Socially Distant Sports Bar on YouTube. You can find the clips there, you can listen to our episodes, and you can watch the playlists there as well. Mike, how are you, sir? Are you all good?
Good, thank you, Steph. Very well, very well.
Excellent. Ellis, all good in the lockdown with you?
Yeah, I just really miss playing football. I realised today, if I could do anything once this lockdown is lifted, it would be have a good game of football with my mates. I don't know, I just really want to...
That'd be 5-a-side max.
It'd be a 5-a-side training session, and I wouldn't know one of them.
Playing 2 and in with one person.
What have you missed most, Mike?
Well, do you know, we're recording this on a Saturday, spoiler alert, because Elle's doing some stuff tomorrow, very worthy stuff tomorrow. I missed just continuing a drinking session today. I was having a couple of drinks in the sunshine, really enjoying it. I had 2 pints in the afternoon. I thought, it was a perfect day for a drink. But professional, I stopped drinking 7 hours ago to do this. So, you know.
Well, you watched Wales-Scotland from 1988.
Yes.
Because BBC Wales are replaying classic Welsh fixtures. So they showed Wales-Italy in the football from 2002.
I'm not saying this was my idea, but I did broach the subject with Rodri Talvin-Davies a while back when they were showing the old Wales football games. I said, rugby?
Okay, so we got you to thank for it. Yeah. Now, I probably should have watched this so we could have a proper discussion, but had the game changed as drastically as I imagine?
I was watching it with my boy there, and he couldn't believe. He kept asking me, "What are they doing, Dad?" He'd never seen things like scrum halves dummying the ball, no one lifting in a line now. Place kicks for kickoffs. People standing around at half time having an orange, not going into a changing room. No score on the pitch. No clock on the screen. I mean, it was everything. But I thought the skill level. I watched that game. What a Brahma of a game that is. They're flipping both sides, playing some great rugby, some really, really good rugby. But not as different as that football doc we talked about last week. That was night and day. It was recognisably rugby. And was it 2 years later than that football doc? Yeah, this was 88, so this was 4 years after, wasn't it?
Yeah, 84.
Yeah. So, but still a different world. I mean, and at the anthems at the beginning, so Scotland playing Wales, and 2 things struck me. One was that there was just 3 random blokes with a scarf and a flag, just stood behind the teams, right? Which my son assumed were mascots, but they were just like 3 random pissheads, just standing in the middle of the pitch, right?
Yeah.
And then they played "God Save the Queen" for Scotland. So nobody sang.
Did they really?
Did they?
Yeah. So
they used to do that for Wales.
Wow.
They used to play "God Save the Queen" for Wales until the 70s.
So none of the Scottish boys sang, obviously, and everyone just booing.
Yeah.
And then they played the Welsh anthem, which was fairly appalling compared to modern standards.
Yeah.
And then there were pitch invasions during the game. I'd forgotten that. Like 5 minutes before the end, there's suddenly about 1,000 people on the pitch, and John the Davies trying to shoot people up because they haven't finished.
Yeah.
And Ben said, "What are they doing, Dad?" I said, "Well, it's just a pitch invasion, mate. That used to happen."
Yeah.
My dad used to send me down. We used to sit up in one of the stands sort of higher up, and he used to send me down. This was perfectly acceptable. I would be younger than your boy Ben, so I would be about the age of my eldest, sort of 9. And my dad would go, "Right, meet you down by the goalpost down there."
Superb.
After the game.
Yeah.
5 minutes before the end, I'd go down with all these, like you say, massive piss heads and just pile onto the pitch.
I did it. Yeah. I remember keeping I think it was the game before that. It might have been the Thorburn game, like in '86. I remember running on the field and just keeping a piece of turf, put a piece of turf in my pocket, and I had an old, the sort of tray you put minced beef in from the butcher's, like a polystyrene tray. And I went home and put that bit of turf in a polystyrene tray and watered it for 2 weeks. Thinking I could keep it going. It obviously died, right? It obviously died, but I mean, so at the end of the game, there must have been 5,000-10,000 people on the pitch around the tunnel.
Well, every time I went to watch the Scarlets in that period, I would be on the pitch at the end of the game. When Llanelli beat Australia 13-9 in 1993, I ended up on the pitch. Also, in football, it was very, very common until more recently than you'd think. So, and also in big fixtures. So, for the home and away documentary that we chose last week, that was the Milk Cup final in '84, but there's no goal. It ends 0-0. I watched the '86 FA Cup final 2 years later, and when Everton score, there's hundreds of people on the pitch. And when Graham Sharp scores that great goal in the Merseyside derby, they're pouring on from the Everton end. It's just a thing that used to happen.
Again, leading on from the last couple of podcasts, I was watching that thinking, the referee, he's the same age as David Beckham, right? He looked like he'd walked off Dad's army, right? I couldn't believe it.
Well, Clive Dunn is like 47 in the first series of Dad's army.
He's the same age as me, which is very depressing. But then the other fella there, Phil May, who played second row for Wales, just a shambolic-looking fella. I mean, I'm sure, I'm not casting aspersions on his character or anything, but I thought, how old is he? Because he's got this bald head, and he's got this moustache and this pointy nose, and this sort of like, he's got skinny arms, but a sort of fairly big arse. But he doesn't look particularly in shape at all. Right?
No. And he's got like man boobs.
Yeah, I mean, well done for pointing that out. But I mean, I thought, how old is he? Because he looks old, right?
Yeah.
And I Googled it, and he was 31. And I said, that's the same age as Adele.
I had his poster on my wall, Phil May, believe it or not. And the thing with Phil May is, like, talking about his physique, he was representing Wales, his country at its
level.
national sport at the highest level. He played in the '87 World Cup.
Amateur. He had the job as a stripper to keep him going in the week, obviously.
He had that, what people don't have anymore is the haircut that he had, the sort of the Cadfael haircut. If you're unfamiliar with Cadfael, he was a 12th century medieval monk detective.
I love these sports podcasts, honestly.
Was on ITV.
Can you imagine pitching that show?
Yeah.
You're in the lift pitching Cadfael.
Yeah.
He's a monk
He's
detective.
a medieval monk detective. Yeah, Welsh guy. Had a monastery in Shrewsbury, yeah.
What sort of crimes? General. Ecclesiastical, agricultural.
It's to steal bits of meat, probably. I don't know, whatever.
All the stuff. Blasphemy. Everything.
What's he going to look like? Do you remember Phil May, who played for...
Get him in. Get Phil May in. Lose the moustache, Phil.
Phil May in a cassock.
Looked a bit like Richie Collins.
A tonsure is called that. A tonsure. Who can go out with a tonsure? Because Richie Collins was 26 at the time. Like I played rugby with people like Nathan Budgett, who obviously played for Wales.
Yes.
Budge was losing his fur in university, just that's the way it was. So he just shaved it off, but no one thinks of that.
Yes.
Now, he's just a...
When did that become a thing then? When did that become an okay thing to do and you weren't necessarily far right if you shaved your head?
I'm going to say by the time I'd left uni, so late 90s, that was it.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say as well. I remember going out in town in 97, 98 and men in their 20s had shaved heads and I didn't necessarily think that they were in Combat 18 or anything.
Yeah, because I haven't seen anyone with the Cadfael film.
Not even old people have it now.
No, but
Bobby Charlton doesn't have a comb over anymore.
Yeah.
The guy who basically did more than anyone to popularise it.
Doesn't have one, does he?
Gregor Fisher,
the bloke from the Hamlet commercial, as he's known. But when we were a kid, if you saw someone who was bald and you called him like Kojak or Duncan Goodhue, it's because those people were exceptional. They were,
yeah.
You don't look at Alan Shearer and go Kojak, because
I will from now on.
If Alan Shearer's listening, he's a fantastic footballer and a good-looking man.
If we're talking about how much rugby has shifted on, let's start with Elis, because your clip, I think your first round clip ties in best.
What I find amazing about this clip, and it's Jonah Lomu in the 1995 Rugby World Cup, steamrollering my cat.
Amazing.
This is the big man, Lomu. He's still on his feet. Lomu could score. That's a great try for New Zealand.
And what I find amazing about this clip, and it still affects me in the way it did then, is that he was so different and he revolutionised his sport to such an extent. Even though everything he was doing and everything New Zealand were doing it was all within the laws of the game. It was like they were cheating. Because he was 6'5", he could run the 100 metres in 10.8 seconds. Now, in those days, in 1995, your wingers were small and quick and light on their feet. That was the rule. And in Wales, certainly in 1995, if you had a 6'5" rugby player, he would have been in the pack. But New Zealand had him on the wing, and it was insane. And he became bigger than rugby in a way that I think Tiger Woods was bigger than golf and Ali was bigger than boxing.
Definitely.
He was such a draw. And when I say that it was like he was cheating, I was trying to think of other examples of sports people who've done this to their chosen sport and profession. Now, someone like Emil Zatopek, I think, is probably the best example in running, just rewrote the rule book. I think it's much harder in a team game. I think Dennis Lilly is probably quite a good example in cricket because his fast bowling was so aggressive and so different. It must have been absolutely terrifying facing one of his deliveries in the 70s. But with Lomu...
You had things like, there were technique things, like someone like Dick Fosbury in the high jump.
Yeah.
Broke the world record by about a foot, right? And then,
But imagine being there the first day he did that.
Yeah. What's he doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
What are you doing?
Yeah.
And I think around that time, so say the 98 World Cup was the first time I think I'd probably had a good look at Zidane, and it was the first time I'd had a properly good look at Ronaldo, the first Ronaldo, the Brazilian Ronaldo. And they were both fantastic footballers, but what they were doing was recognisably football. It was football, just done much better than I'd seen it done by anyone else. It was like Lomu had been zapped onto the pitch from another planet, and he was so much bigger than his opposing number. It reminded me of school level rugby. Now, my dad used to get very, very frustrated when I was a kid, because I think, and I know that you two are rugby obsessives, but I think one of the weaknesses of rugby is that there's such disparity amongst boys, say of 14. You've got boys of 14 who are 6'1" and boys of 14 who are 5'1". Now, if you're the 5'1" kid, rugby is a shit game to play. And I used to, my dad just wanted me to. My dad was desperate for me to play the team. And there was I won't name him in case he listens to this podcast, but there was
and he's massive.
And he's huge. But there was a boy in our year.
Was he ham bone, as you say?
Ham bone. He was a farmer's son. His dad was a bouncer as well. This guy, at a parents' evening, my dad went up to him, assuming he was a teacher. Now, this guy's dad, he was about 5. Right? So, first game, when I was playing against him, the boys in my street and the boys in my primary school, we were all about the same size. So I hadn't really come across this disparity in size before. And I remember saying to Dad, I said, I'm not enjoying rugby, actually, because every time X runs at me, it's just impossible to tackle him. And my dad would get very frustrated. What are you talking about? It's important. What are you talking about? You name me a human being who can run without legs. You just ankle tap him. Ankle tap him. So then I would try that and I would get steamrolled.
Broke your wrist.
And the thing I found amazing with Lomu, it was like watching an 18-year-old play 11-year-olds. And he was on the wing. Yeah. He wasn't even a flanker or a number 8.
You watch Lomu run with the ball. Now, he scored some fantastic tries for New Zealand, and like Al said, completely revolutionised rugby. You watch his Super Rugby games as well. It is just staggering. But he would run with the ball often in one hand. But hold it almost like a cricket ball. These big hands. And he would swat. It was like swatting flies. He had that enormous handoff. He had great pace. He had legs like him. He had that sort of Polynesian build where he had, big strong arse, big strong thighs. I think John the Davis is my favourite player that I've seen play. But certainly the player that I found most exciting and that really gave rugby as a sport a real kick up the arse was John Alomu.
When you were playing, really good rugby in the 90s, I've seen the pictures on Facebook. You were in very good shape.
You're very close.
And you were spending a lot of time in the gym. And, I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass. You were physically quite an impressive specimen.
Yes.
We were talking about this once when you and I were on the way to a gig. And I said, so back in those days, how much fruit and veg were you eating? And you said, none, 0.
No, nothing.
It just makes me laugh.
Nothing at all.
So where were you getting your vitamins from? Supplements?
Yeah, tablets. I had a girlfriend came around at the time when I was living in Bradford on Avon. I remember we just started seeing each other. And I said I'd cook her dinner on a Friday, and I said, "Do you want beef or do you want chicken?" She said, "I'll have chicken, lovely." But it was just chicken. She said, "Anything else?" I said, "No, I'm not eating carbs." So I just gave her a bowl of grilled chicken.
But weren't you vitamin deficient then, or were you just having all?
No, there's plenty of vitamins and vitamin tablets, mate. There's loads. That's what they're for.
What about fibre?
In fact, fibre.
Yeah.
Rice cakes now and again. you can buy fibre. You can get little sachets. Put in your protein powder.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can eat or buy in a greengrocer's that you can't get out of a bottle perfectly easily. Without none of that bullshit. No washing up to do. It's basically like Space 1999, man. But when all the lockdown started and people started panic buying, old Bubbins was laughing his tits off, isn't he? Freezer full of chicken bits and 14 bottles of vitamins. Everyone's happy.
Shout out to the people at Centrum.
Did you get the hollering about it massive? I remember a quote from one of the bodybuilders back in the 80s. I can't remember which one it was now, but I was big into it at the time. Who said, when you see the bloke winning the Mr. Olympia and looks this picture of health and fitness and strength, that bloke who's winning is probably the one that's closest to death. Because his body is completely stripped of all fluid. He's got, he's been on diuretics. He's completely shredded. His heart rate is nuts. His blood pressure's through the roof. you know. But, you know...
Oh, went bleak really quick.
No, just saying, but he won the Olympia, didn't he? So
Yeah.
Swings and roundabouts.
Like, gotta do something.
When we get the T-shirts made up for the show eventually, that's on the back for sure.
Well, that's what we'll have to call this.
You can bring your dinner on the front, and you got to die of something on the back.
Tonight show. Got to die something.
Wow. I think the only negative I ever saw with the rise of Lomu was every other country then almost abandoned small players in favour of inferior big players.
Yeah, because what he was big and really good.
Yes,
but definitely,
and that's what people missed.
Selectors, they all went down the. Well, let's find some really big blokes. Well,
yes,
the really good bit is crucial there as well.
I remember my uncle saying if the wingers are going to be 6'5", then where does that leave normal humans? Because how big are your number 8s going to be if you?
But then even in the midst of that sort of race for size, World Player of the Year one year was Shane Williams. You know.
So I used to do a radio show on a Saturday morning, and it was a sports show. And when we heard that he was signing for the Blues, we got his number, phoned him up, and he came on one Saturday morning while he was still in New Zealand. And very nice man. And did that thing at the end of the interview where I said, "Oh look, if you're ever around, you're always welcome in the studio," because that's kind of the polite thing to say. You don't think anything of it. And then 3 weeks later, just as we were about to go on air, there was a phone call up from reception. And Mr. Lomu was in reception for you. What? You up? Mr. Lomu was in reception for you. So, okay, he came downstairs and Jonah is there. He's driven himself from wherever he's renting a place in Cardiff. I was just popped in to say hi.
Oh, nice man.
So you got any time for me on the show today?
Yes.
Do you know what? We'll squeeze you in.
Yeah.
We'll squeeze you on the show this week, Jonah.
I think so.
What a dude.
Oh, fair play to him. That's fantastic.
Right. Mike, your first clip for this week is what?
Well, as we all know on the show, I Like American Things, we talked to a fella called John Facenda last week who did all the commentary for a lot of the NFL films in the 70s and the late 60s, early 80s. This is a bit of culture for us, lads. We're a sports podcast. We talk about Lionel Blair and Bobby Darver with equal aplomb. Right? This is...
Just all week watching that.
This is John Facenda reciting Rudyard Kipling's If.
If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being hated.
So there we go. I love it when there's yin and yang. So we got the lovely voice, the mellow, rich tones of John Facenda there in his beautiful speaking voice, which is contrasting very nicely with some really savage hits in football and some fumbles and some bits and bobs. That's a really nice thing. They used to do these sort of specials all the time. NFL films, they would do. They do poems or they do little blooper reels or they would do these little fun things. I love that one. That's one of my wife's favourite poems, Kelly, if you're listening. She hasn't listened yet, mind. We're 5 in.
Yes, he hasn't listened either.
Keep saying she will.
The other day I said to her, Jonathan Davis, the greatest rugby player of all time, likes our podcast.
I know.
And she said,
I know.
I don't know who that is. I don't care.
I know.
I do not care.
So that's her favourite poem. So that's really a tip of the hat to the wife there. She brings me beers when we do the records. And so, yeah, that's my favourite sports commentator doing my wife's favourite poem.
It shows how I think culture's been dumbed down. Because it's inconceivable now that you would do that on any sport show.
Can you imagine it? Can you imagine?
I don't know which sport has the highest brow of
cricket,
punter. Cricket. Would
maybe,
you have?
Yeah. Of the mainstream sport, I'm sure like real tennis gets a higher brow.
Yeah, but during the Ashes, would you have a 2.5 minute clip of
No.
You know, someone of Shane Warne reading If?
Well, do you remember when what's his name?
Ricky Ponting getting him to do it. I just can't imagine it.
And then you listen to the radio. I still love the radio commentary. Listen to Test Match Special. They'd have
Test Match Special.
Brian Johnson would spend a good 10 minutes describing like an apple tart someone had sent him.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if they had,
But that John Facenda, the one phrase that stuck in my mind all week from the Dick Butkus one last week, and I've got to mention a thing in a second about that. Was what he said. Butkus was Moby Dick in a goldfish bowl. I thought, come on, you're not getting that. You know what I mean? You got to know who Moby Dick is for a kick-off.
Someone bought me the DVD of Civilization, the Kenneth Clarke documentary from the late 60s. Yeah. He spends probably 2 minutes talking about a pot, and that is all it is. And it's a 2,000-year-old pot. Now, I love a history documentary. They were showing this on Saturday night. It was like sort of prime time where you'd have X Factor.
Whatever the documentary is on BBC 4, I will watch it, just to prove that they can make everything interesting. I watched a whole documentary about a year and a half ago on the Apple, right? Not the computer, not the computer firm. Apples you eat. I said to Kelly, so what are you watching this for? I said, this is one of the best things I've ever seen. So what's it about? I said, apples. So what do you mean? I said, I don't. When did you start liking apples? I don't like apples. This is the point. I'm watching
When did you start liking apples?
When did you start liking apples? It's such a great start to any conversation.
Can I just say, before we move on from... I want to say a quick thank you. I mentioned Dick Butkus last week, being my favourite football player, and being torn that I was a Packers fan, but a huge Dick Butkus fan. A lovely chap called Geraint Rees got in touch with me via Twitter and showed me this signed Dick Butkus football in a case. I said, oh, well, that's with a very impressive sports biography shelf as well. I said, mate, is that real? He said, yeah. My wife won it in a poker game in Las Vegas 15 years ago. I said, what a story, and that's a brilliant thing to have. He said, do you know what? It needs a good home. I'll send it to you. I thought, you've got to be kidding me. And then I showed you the photographs. So then, in the middle of the week, this beautiful, full-sized official NFL football with Dick Butkus' signature, certificate of authenticity, in a presentation case, and a really good rugby book, arrived from Geraint Rees. So can I just say thank you so much to Geraint Rees. You don't know how appreciative I am.
That is fantastic.
Oh, I know, it blew my mind.
If anyone out there's listening, I like Ian Rush, Gareth Bale, Aaron Ramsey, Mark Hughes, Neville Southall.
Right, Geraint, thank you for sending that
You're
to
an
Mike.
angel. Thank you.
Absolute legend of a man. Right, my first clip for this week is from 1973. It is Brazil playing football against a team that is nominally called Shamrock Rovers.
Their opponents, not a Republic of Ireland team, not a Northern Ireland team. Instead, a combination of the two. Stars. This is full of stars. Jennings, Martin O'Neill, Giles, Terry Conroy, and the late Derek Dougan.
This is kind of harks back to episode 1 when Ellis chose Barry McGuigan winning the world title.
I listened to episode 1 again like 2 days ago. That bit, that bit when McGuigan's own man is singing Danny Boy. I was in my bedroom. I had goose pimples everywhere. It was fantastic. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
It's well worth watching the whole thing of that. This one, right, is a game in 73. So to kind of put it in context, 72... You've had Bloody Sunday. You've had the Five Nations unable to finish.
Yeah, Scotland and Wales haven't played.
Scotland and Wales won't go there to play games in Ireland. And in 73, the Northern Ireland team are playing their home games in England during the Home Nations Championship and during their World Cup qualifiers because teams won't go to Belfast to play.
It was probably Europe's, if not the world's, most violent city in the 70s.
And yet, some guy manages to convince Brazil to play a friendly against a combined Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland team. Now, a guy called Lewis Kilcoyne was in charge of the Republic of Ireland at the time. He's out in Brazil on a Republic of Ireland tour during 72. Says to the president of the Brazilian FA, you're doing a tour of Europe next year, will you come and play in Dublin? And he says, no, we're kind of full, we've got this all sorted. So what if you were going to play against an all-Ireland team rather than just the Republic? And the Brazilian guys say, yeah, sure. But they managed to get Derek Dougan and Johnny Giles in the same room, so respective captains of Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and they say, okay, well, if you can get Brazil here, we can turn out a team. And it's remarkable because I think you only have to go back to the 50s and both teams were still calling themselves Ireland in various tournaments, and players were turning out for both in those days until really? I think they played Wales in, I think Northern Ireland, in inverted commas, played Wales in a World Cup qualifier for 58, so it would have been a Home Nations Championship game. And then FIFA cottoned on to the fact that these guys had already played for the Republic side in the past as well. And they went, right, okay, we need to work out how we do this. So the kind of delineation between the two sides becomes bigger at the end of the 50s. So this flies in the face of absolutely everything. And you've got Catholics, Protestants, all turning out for the same team. I know this happened in rugby, so it's not...
You know, when I watched it back, I think it's difficult to imagine now just the sort of hold that Brazil team had over the general public. Because they'd won it in 62, but no one had watched 62, really. 66, Brazil had gone out in the group stages. Pelé had been kicked out of the tournament. 1970 was the first World Cup in colour, and they were on a different planet to everyone else. What a side!
Yeah,
and there was just something about that Brazil team that all football fans of a certain age, if you came of age in the early 70s, you would have been obsessed with that Brazil team. But they didn't play in the UK very often. Wales played them the most, probably, because we'd played them in 58 and then I played them in friendlies because there was a relationship between the FAW and the Brazilian FA. The Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland had never played Brazil before. So for them to come over to Ireland for the first time and play a game of, of such magnitude, it was an enormous draw because they were the football's Harlem Globetrotters.
Yeah, I was going to use that exact analogy then.
And they managed to get Lansdowne Road, which the Republic of Ireland side hadn't had up until this point. And it's kind of the tipping point as well where the Republic, they don't quite start to get good yet. But this is where they kind of push on from. So this week on Documentary Duty, it is Mike. What are you bringing to the bar this week, Mike?
Right, this is an absolutely fantastic documentary. I'm a big hockey fan, ice hockey fan. Not as big as I used to be when I lived over in Canada, but still follow it. My brother-in-law loves it. My little nephew loves it. My sister loves it. But I found this fascinating. This, and it's got a lot of crossover between a lot of sports. This is a documentary called Ice Guardians about enforcers in ice hockey.
They said, you're going to play in the NHL. It might take you 10 years, but you're going to have to fight every step of the way. And I said, you know what, I'll do it.
It elevated to the point where it was just like, oh my God, like I was in the Rocky movie.
This is a super heavyweight bout.
The idea of fighting in hockey really splits people. You have these sort of two main camps, and the first one might be rough old school hockey. It's all about a notion of respect and honour. And the other side says, actually, we don't need this anymore.
It all seems wildly entertaining until something like this happens.
So what I found fascinating about that is that in ice hockey, there was always a role, or sort of from certainly after the war until about the early 90s, I suppose, of an enforcer. So where you'd have your superstar players, your goal scorers, and then you'd have people who wanted to take those people out of the game. And if you want to take someone in a game of hockey, it's it's a very fast, very violent sport. It can be done. So your team would employ an enforcer, basically. So somebody who always had your superstars back, and that was their job. So they would fight on your behalf. They would take people out who sort of pushed you around. And this is a documentary all about that. And a few things stuck in my mind. One is there's a fellow there in the doc called Brian Mcgrath, who is far too handsome a man to be playing any sort of professional sport. Like a really good looking dude, but tough as teak. And when I played rugby over there, a lot of the boys would play hockey in the winter, and then they play rugby in the summer season over there, right? Certainly in the eastern part of Canada. It's one of the few places I've been where they absolutely would love to fight. So you'd have a game of rugby, and suddenly square up with a bloke, and he'd just say, you want to drop the gloves? You want to drop the gloves? I'm like, what? Drop the gloves? What are you talking about? and then they would just start fighting you. But it was a proper stand-up fight, because that's what...
put your dukes up.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's just part of the whole fabric of the game of hockey, and it was always accepted. We've talked before about accepting risk and accepting physical harm, and there's a contract between the players, an unwritten contract between the players. Hockey had that, and what I find fascinating about that is when players talk about the fact that modern day players, especially your superstars you want to build a team around, are more at risk now than they would have been 15, 20 years ago. And there's a lot of times in rugby, when I think about when we used to ruck back in the day, right? And you go on the floor, you would get pieces kicked out of your back and your legs and your arse and your arms and your shoulders, right? But you didn't get the sort of Sam Warburton jackal injuries when you're sort of bridging rucks and getting hit in the back of the neck. So there was a lot of broken bones and bloody noses and cuts and scrapes, but there weren't a lot of the really bad neck and shoulder injuries, I don't think. I mean, that's anecdotal, right? But they said in hockey the same thing. You have players like Gretzky. I don't think Gretzky ever had a concussion.
And he's not particularly big, Wayne Gretzky.
Well, he's small. Even by hockey standards at the time, he's small, right? When he first came into the league, there was a fellow called Dave Semenko who was ridiculously tough. He's in the video. He was his enforcer in Edmonton. Then when Semenko left, they brought in this Marty McSorley, who was his next enforcer. And Marty McSorley was a bloody unbelievably hard man. When Gretzky went to the Kings, one of the provisions when he went to LA was he took Marty McSorley as well. So they had to give Marty McSorley a contract. So you weren't just signing Gretzky, you had to sign his enforcer as well. What I find fascinating watching that is, as a dad whose kids play sport, is there's bits where one of the boys is talking about his dad basically said, if you want to play hockey, you're never going to be the quickest, you're never going to be the most skillful. You better learn to fight on skates. And that could be your route to the NHL. So he knew that his job was to punch people on a pair of skates.
The one guy who says, as soon as I've got the shirt grabbed, I know it's all over because I don't even have to look anymore. I know from where my hand is, if I swing my left then, I'm definitely making contact with his face.
And if you watch the official, because it was part of the game, they'll skate around and the officials will they'll watch the two of them duke it out. As soon as one goes to the floor, they'll break it up. But until that moment, they just let them get on with it.
The thing I found astonishing, and I'm probably guilty of watching this through the prism of a football fan, is that in football, all of the authorities are unanimously trying to reduce fighting. And, you think of Norman Hunter and Franny Lee and...
I love that scrap when they get sent off.
It's very good.
So good.
But all the time, it is condemned by the commentators and is condemned by the authorities, and you get in trouble for it. What I found astonishing was that it is a recognised part of the game.
Yeah.
I could not
the
believe
commentators
it.
Just go, here we go.
Yeah.
Well, they'll also talk about people's, he's a southpaw, he's got an orthodox...
Yeah. And they're training as boxers. They're not even training as hockey players.
No.
They're doing boxers training, and they're doing martial art training.
The point they made about Gretzky could perform because McSorley or Semenko always had his back. My sister lives in Pittsburgh, married a Pittsburgh boy. They worship Sidney Crosby. He was a fantastic hockey player, right? Probably the best player in the league. A lot of people think he's the greatest player since Gretzky, right? But he gets concussions all the time because people know that they've got to take Sidney Crosby out of a game. So they'll send somebody on and they'll take Crosby out. They'll take their 2-minute penalty or whatever, their 4 minutes, and get on with it. But back in the day, you'd have had a Marty McSorley or a Dave Semenko there saying, if you want to go near Crosby, I'm going to put you in hospital. So that didn't happen.
The one guy who, I can't remember which guy it was, but the one who spends the post-season wrapping his knuckles in chains.
Yeah, and punching trees.
Isn't it great?
I mean, holy shit.
I know.
Do some sit-ups.
I didn't think...
No. I'm going to bust my knuckles up so it doesn't hurt as much during the season.
I would have assumed that would make your knuckles softer and weaker. Punching trees.
I think his logic was that if I punch your cheekbone, it's going to break my knuckles. So if I get
I
think he said if I get my knuckles all gnarly now
and calloused, he wanted his hands calloused. What's your son do? Oh, he fights on ice skates for a living.
Yeah,
he's out the back punching the apple tree now. Got a bike chain round his hand.
But in a way, again, it's sensible. They told people in the parking lots, in the car parks, we would say, do you like watching fights? And like 80%, I'd say, go, yeah, of course, that's why we watch hockey games.
But the way they talk about the noise as well, that they are right, that the noise at any sporting event, when something exciting happens, is discernibly different from the noise when there's a bundle going on, be it football, rugby, whatever it is. I've never seen one in athletics, but maybe the steeplechase gets out of hand on occasions.
I mean, it must have happened.
Just someone trying to dunk someone in the water on a steeplechase. But
two blokes with javelins fighting.
That'd be a decent scrap, wouldn't it?
The complete acceptance of fighting in the NHL, almost structured fighting, that it was a recognised part of the game, in that you're there is an enforcer in every team, the same way that in 1970s English football, every team had a hard man. So it was Terry McDermott for Liverpool, you had Norman Hunter for Leeds, Ron Chopper Harris for Chelsea. There was always one. Great days, man. And then it was Graham Souness, and even in the 90s, Vieira and Roy Keane were the sort of the hard. I wouldn't have messed with Roy Keane. Also, what a obsession with winning. But they were regarded as the ones who were there to look after their more talented teammates, as well as obviously Roy Keane could play. They could all play to But what I found amazing about it was that, this actually is sort of relevant to my next clip. But whenever there's fighting in all of the other sports I've ever watched, and I'm someone who loves sport, fighting is condemned. That is universal across all sport, apart from in NHL, where it is seen as, obviously, boxing and actual combat sports aside, but it is commentated on as if it's boxing, and I just couldn't get my head around it.
Well, this is the thing that I think it's changed in the last 15 years probably, that it's changed. They brought up because they wanted to grow this TV market. I hate the word grow as a verb, right? But they wanted to grow their markets and reach down a place that didn't traditionally, there was no, you didn't grow up in San Jose skating around frozen lakes as a kid, right? There was no hockey in Los Angeles. So when they sort of take these teams into markets that haven't got a background of hockey, right? Like you said, they play baseball or they play American football or basketball, so they do something else. Then they must have looked at that and thought, what the bloody hell's going on here? Well, they're just punching lumps out of each other. So the NHL thought, we need to change this to appeal to be more of a friendly product for these people that don't understand the history of hockey.
It's a bit like Aussie rules where you can't get sent off. Well, I did gigs in Australia about 10 years ago, and an Australian comic took me to an Aussie rules game. And as we were walking to the ground, he was explaining the rules to me and just said, and by the way, you can't get sent off. And I just could not get my head around. So I kept offering him hypothetical scenarios. Yeah. So, and it was always, you'd get cited for it on the Monday and you might get suspended, but you stay on the pitch. I always used to think it was a bit like you took someone who had a vague understanding of most sports and told them to come up with a new sport in 5 minutes with a gun pointed at their head.
Just make stuff up.
So it's like
2 sets of goalposts.
It's the size of a cricket pitch. You can't get sent off.
There's a guy dressed as a fishmonger in between the posts.
and you've got to touch a ball on the floor or punch it or pick it up. And you can't throw it, you can only punch it. What?
Yeah, you can punch it, but it's a rugby ball.
You kick it, the guy catches it, it's a mark, no one can touch him.
Yeah.
But they can touch it, but they can't get sent off.
It's got to be an oval. What?
Yeah, how big is the pitch? Huge.
Too big of anything.
Right, this one is available on Netflix. It's called Ice Guardians. We'll stick a trailer up on the YouTube channel on the playlist there, so you can have a look at that and watch it through. Right, round 2 of clips. Elis, you are first up with this one, and we are back to the 70s.
Awful lot to talk about in this clip. It's only about 3.5 minutes long. Whenever commentators and pundits and journalists talk about the clip that sums up 1970s football, they often say Ronnie Radford's goal for Hereford against Newcastle United in the third round of the 1972 FA Cup. I think this is more archetypally 70s than that, even though in the Ronnie Radford clip at Edgar Street you've got all the kids running on the pitch in their NHS glasses and snorkel parkers and all of that kind of stuff. The fact the pitch is a bog and the fact Ronnie Radford looks about 60 and all that kind of stuff. The clip I've chosen is Jeff Astl's very dodgy goal for West Brom against Leeds United at Elland Road in 1971. Lost the title to Arsenal by a point that season, so it's the height of the Don Revie era when they were a really fantastic side and they seem to be going for the title every season. They lost to West Brom, who came 17th that season, so they weren't a particularly good team. Certainly, as far as the Leeds United players are concerned, and as far as Don Revie was concerned, and Leeds fans in particular are concerned, this is the game that lost them the title. Now, the goal itself, I asked the biggest football expert I know, Jonathan Wilson, who writes for The Guardian, I said, should it have stood? And he said, rules were slightly more open to interpretation in that era because far less football was televised. But by my understanding, unless it was a special directive, which I don't know about, I don't think it should have stood. And then a commentator for Five Live, who was a West Brom fan, chipped in and said, no, absolutely no chance. So in the early 70s, I think a lot of people in football went by the whole Bill Shankly thing of, well, if he's not interfering with play, what's he doing on the pitch in the first place? Now, the goal is shambles. The clip is only 3.5 minutes long, so you can see it for yourself. The reason I love it so much is the commentary. It is, without a doubt, my favourite piece of commentary of all time. For the way Barry Davies says, and Leeds will go mad. And they have every right to go mad. He's referring to the fact that the game is still ongoing, but the referee needs protection from the police because there's been a pitch invasion. And also, he's been surrounded by the Leeds players who are furious. Don Revie comes on the pitch holding a tartan picnic blanket. I don't know why that is. Leeds at the time, I think if you weren't a Leeds fan, they were generally hated by most football supporters because as good a side as they undoubtedly were, they had a reputation for being tough and uncompromising and hard and dirty and cynical. And
you won them all by cheating.
Yeah, absolutely. And
what a film!
So
go on.
They were intimidating. Well, intimidating the referee, but they were perfectly happy to state their case to the referee, who, in a fantastic 1970s fashion, is called Ray Tinkler. Great.
Oh, come on!
Great name. No one has surnames like that anymore. No one's called Tinkler. By 1975, whenever anything happens in the stands, the commentators always say the same thing. It's always minus minority, not real fans, English disease, kick them out, all that kind of stuff. Barry Davies seems to be condoning it, which
he's right into this.
Which is what I find so funny. Now, obviously, it's not funny when 2 minutes later the linesman's hit by a coin, I think, from the Leeds end.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not funny. It's just the fact that Barry Davies is so incensed.
By Barry Davies?
Wanker! What? Barry Davies is so incensed on behalf of the Leeds players. And, the game happened at the end of April, so the league season is winding down. It's the business end, and it's really tight between Leeds and Arsenal. Arsenal won the double that season, of course, as well. And it's just, and Leeds will go mad, and they have every right to go mad, I think is a piece of commentary that every supporter of a certain age remembers. the other thing is...
These Leeds fans will smash up the town centre, and they have every right to smash up the town centre.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, there was a riot after the game, which meant that Leeds couldn't play the first 4 games.
They had every right to riot after that game.
They couldn't play the first 4 games of the following season at home at Elland Road because of the behaviour of the supporters. It is such a 1970s pitch invasion. So one guy gets on and he's in a mustard suit. Back in the day when you would wear a mustard suit to football. Now, the thing with football hooliganism is by the 90s, by the time I was going to football, it was much older men, and it was more. There was, but also there was a far more sinister edge to it when it was much older blokes. In the 70s, if you watched the really famous moments of football hooliganism, it is kids. It's sort of 15 and 16-year-olds, but the pitch invasion is old men, because they are furious and they think that their team has been robbed of winning a First Division title, and that great Leeds team as well underachieved. They only won a couple of league titles, and they only won 1 FA Cup, I think. But Barry Davis says this is the Yorkshire spirit coming into play. You think you just cannot say this stuff. But the thing with Jeff Astle, all goal scorers are obsessed with scoring goals, and none of them really care how they go in. If you talk to any great goal scorer, they're not, but it's all about the numbers. And when he scores and he realises he's got away with something, and he can't believe it's been given, the look of glee on his face is fantastic, because he's just got this smile that's like, oh my God.
I watched one of those. There was like the top 20 firms in British football thing a couple of years ago, and the number 1 firm, I think, was the Yorkshire Police. And they say, the reason there's no trouble at Leeds games, or not like it used to be now, is they go there absolutely mob-handed, just hundreds of police, loads of horses.
They don't mess about. We played Leeds in 2007 in League One, and it was horrendous up there for the whole day, because Leeds is a one-club city as well, so they're obsessed with their football team up there, and the atmosphere was fantastic at the ground. But I mean, it's not a place to be taken lightly. I don't think it's a bit like Millwall in that. I've had the entire Dockers stand at the New Den chanting "Who's the wanker in the green?" because I was wearing a green coat, and it is quite intimidating when 3,000 people calling you a wanker and they're not
looking round you,
not watching the game. Yeah, my mate Andy.
I was suddenly a Millwall fan.
Seeing about you, it's brilliant, it's hilarious. But there's Leeds is not for the faint-hearted, and Jeff Astle realises what he's done, and I just love it. And they lost the title to Arsenal that season by a point. It's still that apparently, if you talk to Leeds fans of a certain age, they will still refer to him as that bastard Tinkler, which I think says it all.
Sounds like a comedy character from the 70s. that could be the 2 Ronnies.
That bastard Tinkler.
Right, round number 2. I'm going to go next, and this is a clip from 2007. This is Bernard Hopkins and Joe Calzaghe. Oh. Not the fight, but this is, I think, the day before Ricky Hatton fought against Floyd Mayweather in Vegas. And this is in the media room. They've been brought together to have a little conversation, a little kind of confrontation to kind of build up a potential fight. And it's all gone swimmingly. It's all gone fine. But Hopkins doesn't think it's gone quite fine enough. So he walks off, and then his brain kicks in, and he comes back, and he just shouts this at Joe Calzaghe.
I would never let a white boy beat me. I would never let a white boy beat me. I would never let a white boy beat me. I would never let a white boy beat me. I'll never let a white boy beat me. You can call it any statement you want. Anybody can print.
So I was reminded of this clip because another American boxer said a couple of weeks ago, I'd never let a white boy beat me. And at the time, I was covering a lot of boxing for the BBC, and I wasn't out when this actually happened, but a couple of months later, Hopkins came over to the UK to do promo for the fight. I think it was at the Planet Hollywood in London, the restaurant there. And they're doing promo for the fight, and none of the media had questioned Hopkins about this. They kind of just let it ride. I thought, okay, can make some good radio here, if nothing else. or could get set upon by one of the hardest people in the world. Let's ask him a few questions.
Good man.
You had a couple of pints.
I had my bravery juice in me. So what did you
Oi,
think?
Hopkins!
No. Hear me out. Whoa.
I said, well, did you not think it was a little bit racist? What I got was very, very good radio, but also very, very scary moment of my life where a man just shouted at me about how I couldn't possibly understand where he came from, how I probably had a university education and hadn't been... Have you been in the penitentiary?
Has he been to Wales?
I haven't. I'm a white middle-class man from Newport. I've not been to the penitentiary.
I'm the only one, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm the only middle-class bloke from Newport, so I actually have done all right.
The week of the fight, there were all these American journalists chatting with Hopkins. 10 minutes, 15 minutes of his time, that's all he's got. All the Americans get their interviews, and that's it, done. And then all the British journalists, so Steve Bunce, Gareth A. Davis, all the guys from the big papers are there. And Hopkins goes, no, I've done my stuff now. And then clocks myself and the cameraman who was with me in London and went, you again. I was like, oh, here we go. He went, come on in.
Oh, dear.
And sat down next to him, and he went,
he knocked me out.
You've got 5 minutes of my time.
Oh, fair dues.
Hopkins did say later that he was doing it as a way of stoking up interest in the fight.
Absolutely.
And it was all part of the showmanship of, top level boxing in Vegas. I went to that fight. I went over to Vegas for that fight. And the thing with Calzaghe, I was obsessed with him. He's one of my heroes. And it was his first time fighting in America. And also, although he'd fought Eubank and beaten him at the end of his career and had beaten Kessler in Cardiff, which I think is one of the great nights of his career.
I was there for that weigh-in.
Yeah.
That's good.
And Jeff Lacey as well is another one. Hopkins, I was so desperate for him to win. In that way, I often am with Welsh sports people. I was worried that he'd bitten off more than he could chew, and I remember thinking, oh God, I'm not sure if Joe from Newbridge has got what it takes if it's become about race as well, and he got knocked down in the first round, didn't he, Joe Calzaghe? Yeah. I don't know if you remember this. He got knocked down in the first round, and I was working in a cafe at the time. Like, I'd put the whole thing on credit cards. I remember thinking,
good man.
I'm going to be out here for 90 seconds. I'm going to be home by 10:30. And obviously he ended up going on to win. And if you look at things like BoxRec, Hopkins is regarded as the 7th greatest pound-for-pound boxer of all time. He was a good fighter. Admittedly, he was 45 at this point. He was past his best, but he was still a brilliant boxer.
Right, let's head back to the world of rugby. Mike, what's your second clip?
I love this clip. This is Derek Quinnell getting his first cap for Wales in March 1972.
And you can see how keen Derek Quinnell is to get onto this field. Get out the way, he says to the policeman. And listen to this roar for Quinnell. And that's one of the great moments of this international championship campaign. Derek Quinnell, a British Lion before he gets his Welsh cap, and he's waited so long.
So people don't know too much about rugby at that time. There was no sort of free substitution. You had to have an injury, the doctor to certify that you were injured. We talked about that game at the top of the programme. I think of the 30 players that started the game, Wales-Scotland game, 29 finished it, and Wales brought a sub on for a prop in the first 5 minutes. So you played the whole game. So Mervyn Davies was a superstar player, obviously. He got injured, got kicked, I think, and was off. He was right at the end of the game. Now, Derek Quinnell, this was the quirk here, was that he'd already been capped for the British Lions. So he'd been on the Lions tour in 71, played in the third test when they beat New Zealand, and had been there or thereabouts with Wales for a year. But Mervyn Davies, being one of the icons of the game, was the starting number 8. Couldn't get inside. So this game's happened. Merv's had a kick in the head. He's gone to the doctors. The game's virtually over with. It's like 79th, 80th minute, whatever it is. So he's waiting. He's got his tracksuit off and he's waiting for the doctor to give him the all clear. So Clive Rowlands, I think, had it selected as by the change room, sort of holding him back, saying, and then as soon as the doctor says yes, he's injured, he can be replaced, he's off down the tunnel. But we talked about pitch invasions. The tunnel is full of police because they've got to get the players off the pitch because there's going to be 20,000 pissheads in a minute, right, all over the place. So he has to barge through these police, but he's in such a rush to get his first cap because if he doesn't get there before the whistle goes, he doesn't get his cap. Knocks the one copper's helmet off, runs onto the field. I think he touched the ball once, and then the game was over. But he's got his cap, and and I'm sure it's the same with any nationality with your favourite sport. But for a Welsh kid growing up, I don't do regrets, but I would have given anything to play rugby just around that tunnel once and play rugby for 1 minute for Wales. Right, it would have been like freaking Field of Dreams. Right, I would have given everything for that. So to see his fervour to get on the field, but he told a story. He was being interviewed by Scott on the radio recently, and he was telling Scott back. You can't really see it on the clip, but he knocks the copper's helmet off on the way through. He said, and that copper used to wait after that game. On the eve of a big match, the cop would wait in the Angel Hotel because the players would be in the Angel Hotel for Derek to buy him a pint, like by way of an apology. He said, but for years, like on the eve of the game, for years, the same cop would be in there waiting for his free pint off Derek Cornell. But I did a comedy thing that Elle and I did a year or two ago, and we did a rugby special, and I sort of led in character, but led the choir onto the pitch. Not through the players' tunnel, but through the corner tunnel with the flag before the South Africa game. And I thought, my God, I've got goose pimples, and I'm playing the role of somebody else, right? I'm not. I'm wearing a suit. I'm with a bunch of old men in a choir, right? Derek talks about the fact that his wife was in the stands watching it, pregnant with Scott. So I think they gave birth to Scott in the August. This was in the March. He said, you were there for my first cap. You were inside your mother at the time, but you were there for my first cap.
Yeah.
I love that. And then obviously Scott played for Wales, Craig played for Wales. I think Mervyn Davis, he was saying Mervyn Davis is his godfather and Barry John's his uncle. So, I mean,
The whole thing seems very amateurish in that it's a Five Nations game, which at the time, there wasn't a Rugby World Cup till 1987. It's the highest level you can play, I suppose, apart from the Lions touring Australia and New Zealand or South Africa. There's too many people getting in his way. Yeah. And you think, how is this happening?
Why is there no liaison bloke there? Why is there no one just saying to the police, can you move out of the way, please?
Right, let's go book choices. Who wants to go first? Hands up.
Right, the book I've chosen is an absolutely brilliant read. It's just called Barry. It's the story of Barry Sheen, written by Steve Parrish, who obviously was his teammate and one of his best friends. Does a lot of commentary, and a book called Nick Harris. I read this about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. I haven't read it since then, so I'm not gonna blag it. But I remember it being fascinating from start to finish. It's ostensibly about Barry, because it's written by Stephen. He was there at that time. It's much more an expose really of motor racing and motorcycle racing in particular of that period, of that sort of 70s and early 80s period. And we've touched on this before. Just an insane time to be doing that sport. More than 25 teammates and associates were killed while we were racing, and Barry and I may have been the very best of friends, but we never discussed people being killed. It was like a taboo subject. It happened, but you didn't discuss it. It was just one person less in the paddock, and his place in the team or somebody else would soon take the sponsorship, right? So just that you had to have that sort of attitude to it. And then just turn the page. He talks about how life was, with his wife in the 70s. My wife, who has since divorced me, said that racing motorcycles in that era made you a hard, horrible bastard. She was probably right, but only in certain ways. I didn't get too emotional about people dying. We were so passionate about our jobs, we wouldn't let it get to us. The invisible barrier would come up. It was a shallow existence, but everybody looks back on their youth as a period of fun. Now, I find this fascinating. We are adrenaline junkies, and nothing excited us more than scaring ourselves, both on and off the track. We like getting away with it, but I don't know if we ever actually like doing it.
It's an interesting aspect of psychology, that if you're such an adrenaline junkie that you do a thing that could quite plausibly kill you, that you don't even enjoy.
And I'll talk about the Dunlops in another. I mean, we'd do a whole program on the Dunlop family, but I mean, different level. But thrilling to watch, and I love watching those old races like the Kenny Roberts duels with Barry Sheena. Fabulous, he talks about that in there. But yeah, that's a really, really interesting book.
The book I have chosen is a book I know that Steff has read, and I cannot speak highly enough of it, in that I think this book made me a little bit weird for a couple of months after I'd read it. The book is called Born to Run, The Hidden Tribe, The Ultra Runners and the Greatest Race the World Has Never Seen by Christopher McDougall. It's a huge bestseller, so it's sold an enormous amount of copies. Talking about how it made me go a little bit weird, I did Fighting Talk, which I know Mike has done a lot of times, and I finished the book on the tube on the way in, and I went up to Gail Ems, who was on Fighting Talk that day, the badminton player, who I'd never met.
She's
I'd
great.
Never met her before. I'd never talked to her, never tweeted her, and apparently I don't even remember doing this. I was just absolutely knocked sideways by this book. Apparently I walked in and Colin Murray told me that I put the book down on the desk and said to Gail Ems, "Will you let me change your life?"
Brilliant.
I hadn't even said hello.
An American preacher's just turned up.
It sounded like I was about to talk to her about Scientology.
Join the Branch Davidian.
Now, Christopher McDougall, the journalist, he wasn't even a club runner. He was someone who tried to run a couple of miles a couple of times a week. And then he heard about this mysterious tribe of Mexican Indians, the Tarahumara, who live very quietly in the canyons, and they're apparently the best sort of long-distance runners on the planet. Now, in 1993, one of them, who was 57 at the time, came first in this 100-mile race that was done in America. He was wearing a toga and sandals, having done no training at all. And he's taken on the world's top ultra-marathon runners. So what they do is, him and a few of the top ultra-marathon runners in the world, people like Scott Jurek, go to the canyons to try and discover this tribe and learn their secrets. Now, they're a fascinating tribe in that their culture is all built around long-distance running. So they're not a warlike people. They've always basically run away from trouble. But the thing with them is their entire culture is built around it. So they have running festivals and everyone is expected to run. So 90-year-old women will do marathons. It's just one of those things. Now, I read the book. I couldn't put it down. And he talks to one woman who'd recently broken the world record for 100 miles. And for her uncle, ran a 2-hour, 50-minute marathon in a bikini, pausing to down a beer at the 20-mile mark. They are done.
Fair play.
They are made of different stuff.
What time for the pint did you do?
But it's just, you know, as someone who's done a little bit of very, very low level, low quality running, I've never met a runner who hasn't read it, who then hasn't immediately, as soon as the book is finished, gone out and gone for a jog, because it just does that to you. It's very, very inspiring as a book.
That's a really good one, Al. The one I've gone for this week is loosely sport, I would say. It's kind of...
Lionel Blair, My Life in Show Business.
It's Bobby Davro, ouch. It's by a guy called Tim Moore, who's kind of a travel journalist, but most of his books are cycling related. This one is the cyclist who went out in the cold. He's gone along the old Iron Curtain route, but he's done it on a 2-geared East German shopping bike with very, very small wheels. Wow. So he starts at the very top of Finland and goes right the way down the old Iron Curtain, right the way down to the south coast.
On 200 calories a day.
He's struggling to find food as he goes. He eats a lot of reindeer during the first couple of chapters.
Does he really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
this is right up my alley. This is
the cold gets to him early on,
as it would.
Weird. What, in Finland on a bike?
And he says, when Captain Oates succumbed to frostbite on that sorry runners-up trudge back from the South Pole,
Harsh.
He slept with his feet outside the tent. The agony as they thawed inside was literally unbearable. What a tragedy to reflect that if Oates had only been able to pull on a pair of plastic carrier bags on under his socks, he could have starved to death with everyone else 13 days later. So keep your guesses coming for The Secret Guitarist. Leave us a 5-star review and a guess in the rating section of your podcast provider. Selection of this week's guesses. Shakin' Stevens says Rooney 99. Andy Fairweather Lowe says Great Mate, who I presume is a Steve Wright fan. It's got to be Brian May just to piss off John Robbins, says Pumbat 22. We've had a few of you inspired by The Secret Guitarist who've been sending us 70s and 80s sports themes.
This is my mate Phil Davis, who is an extremely good guitarist. He's one of my wife's few friends has become my friend. You sort of inherit friends, right? When you get married, you don't go steady with somebody, you inherit their friends. And usually, at best, it's a friendship of convenience. And if you and your missus split up, you would never darken their door or vice versa again. Phil's actually a good bloke, into his music. He sent this, which I thought, it's only a little clip he did in his bedroom, I believe. Yeah, so Phil's a mate. That is a great... Not only is that really well played, and he's done a great job on it, but it just made me think of how much... Whoever's in charge of music on BBC Sport in the 70s and 80s was some sort of genius. That bit of music is called Drag Race, by the Doug Wood Band. But just think of the Grand Prix music. Think of Ski Sunday. Think of the snooker. Think of Rugby Special.
Sports Night.
Sports Night, right?
Sports Night.
Sports Night's a fantastic theme.
Absolutely all killer. That Drag Racer is such... I don't usually like instrumental music, but that is a fabulous track, right?
Wimbledon.
Oh, Wimbledon, I could.
I think Ski Sunday would be a struggle on an acoustic.
Yeah. I love that. Oof. And how do they make it sound like the sport they're describing?
Now, it's 1969, whenever Ski Sunday started.
I want it to feel like snow.
Yes, a producer would have said to whoever it was, right, I want you to write a bit of music that sounds like skiing. Done. Got it.
A lot of them were lifted from classic, music that was already around. So I remember as a kid putting Mum and Dad's Rumours album on, listening to the chain, and suddenly...
First time you know that's a real song. Blew my mind. Right, at Distant Pod, give us some acoustic versions.
Do Ski Sunday for us.
I did learn to play Grandstand yesterday.
We'll stick it up. Go on
so
then. Right.
It's not.
If you send that over,
it's not me. I am not the secret guitarist, but a few people suggested
have guessed you,
and I want to see if I.
You
can
are a
play
good guitarist, though,
and I worked it out, so I can play it.
I want to see your efforts.
Okay.
All right, send them over. We'll stick them up on at Distant Pod, and if you guys can send us your efforts at either the Grandstand theme or any of the other 70s or 80s themes, then we'll play one a week. Before we go, quick thank you to the guys at Hampshire Hospital's radiology department. They've been in touch with the show. Eltel got in touch with us during the week to say hello to those guys. Keep it all going. Okay, I know everyone out there is having a tough old time of things. You guys are on the front line doing great stuff, so keep it all going.
Yeah.
We'll be back with another one of these this time next week. Thank you very much, guys.
Cheers.
Our pleasure.